I declare open this public hearing of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Public Works and the proposed Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communications and the Arts Command Centre and Canine Facility at Western Sydney International, the Nancy Bird Walton Airport. In accordance with the committee's resolution, this hearing will be broadcast on the Parliament's website, and the proof and official transcripts of proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. I also remind members of the media who may be present or listening on the web of the need to fairly and accurately report the proceedings of the committee. My name is Keith Pitter. I'm the Deputy Chair and the Federal Member for Hinkler, and I'll get the other committee members to introduce themselves. From South Australia.
Tony Zappia, Member for Macon.
From New South Wales.
Maria Kovacic, Senator for New South Wales.
WA.
Tracy Roberts, Senator for PS.
And Tasmania.
Richard Colbeck, Senator for Tasmania.
I now welcome representatives from the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communications and the Arts, the Department of Home Affairs, Australian Border Force, the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry and the Australian Federal Police to give evidence. For the Hansard record, would you each please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear?
James Savage, Assistant Secretary, WSI Delivery for the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communications and the Arts.
Tarani Bathanagay, Australian Border Force, First Assistant Secretary, Strategy and Policy.
Joel Goodison, Acting Assistant Secretary, Property, Department of Home Affairs.
Rick Hall, Director, Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, Western Sydney Airport Program.
Neil Skill, Manager Property for the Australian Federal Police.
Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I should advise you that these hearings are formal proceedings of the Parliament. Consequently, they warrant the same respect as procedures of the Parliament itself. Giving false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of the Parliament. Mr Savage, would you care to make some introductory remarks before we proceed to questions?
Thank you. Just some short remarks, please. Good afternoon and thank you for this hearing to progress a project critical delivering on the commitment from successive governments to introduce a new major airport into the Sydney Basin. Australia is building the Western Sydney International Nancy Bird Walton Airport to provide a curfew-free 24/7 domestic and international passenger airport in Sydney. Demand for aviation services in the Sydney region is forecast to double over the next 20 years, and WSI is an important piece of transport infrastructure to ensure that Sydney's long-term aviation needs can be met. The Australian Government is delivering WSI through its government business enterprise, WSAco, who have been allocated funding to ensure construction of the airport, such as the runway, passenger terminal, the services and infrastructure needed to support airport operations. The Commonwealth also plays an important role in the delivery of WSI, and particularly for an airport with international operations. And today we are discussing how the Commonwealth protects and manages Australia's aviation security, biosecurity and international border. My department plays an active role in coordinating across the Commonwealth to monitor progress and ensure that all agencies are undertaking the necessary preparations to support the commencement of airport operations on time, scheduled for late 2026. Today I'm joined by representatives of the Department of Home Affairs, including the Australian Border Force, the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry and the Australian Federal Police. For simplicity throughout the presentation, we may refer to this group as the border agencies. I would like to extend apologies today on behalf of WSAco. Unfortunately, today's hearing coincides with an important meeting of the board that requires the attendance of key personnel that were otherwise to attend to support the consideration of the project by the committee. Given the close cooperation and strong working relationship of all the parties in the delivery of the project, we are confident that today we can adequately represent the project and answer the questions of the committee. As the committee considers the projects today, an important consideration is that the Australian Government has sized its investment and expectation that all of the operational requirements to manage stage 1 of the airport at 10 million annual passengers are in place. For Commonwealth agencies, this means that planning and designs at a minimum are based around requirements when stage 1 of the airport reaches capacity, still maintaining an eye to the future, knowing that the airport will continue to expand. The Australian Government has staged its decisions around how the Commonwealth supports the airport over successive budgets as plans for operations become more clear and costs more certain. A process undertaken by my department has identified the need for 2 facilities being discussed today, in a command centre to use as a base for operations across the airport precinct and surrounds, and a facility to house the necessary increase in the size of the detector dog program. The location of the airport in Western Sydney brings with it a disassociation from other facilities used by the agencies in Sydney, with much of the infrastructure already in use focused around the existing ports of entry in the east of Sydney. This infrastructure currently used by the agencies is appropriately sized to manage existing operations, or indeed is already at or exceeding capacity. The first facility under this project is what we call a command centre. It is a multi-level office building with both dedicated and shared spaces designed to accommodate operational and support staff. It is located in the terminal plaza close to the passenger terminal and will be the first building in the plaza. Over time, as the airport develops, the terminal plaza will be at the heart of the airport. The second aspect of the project is the Canine facility, which is a specialised, purpose-built facility for the detector dogs that are essential to all three agencies in the delivery of their operations. The business case that we undertook considered options to scale facilities as well who should lead on delivery. The scale and related funding was agreed by government, and the delivery mechanism selected was for WSA to deliver the projects as they are across the rest of the airport site. The measures are in relevant budget papers, but the total equity investment in WSA is not for publication to protect WSA's commercial position with its contractors. This project encompasses the construction of the facilities, incorporating the specialised spatial requirements of the agencies as far as possible, and a base level of fit-out. Agencies will have their own processes in place to complete the fit-out beyond the provision of the base building. We've introduced a three-tiered governance approach involving senior executives of the department, WSA and the agencies to provide oversight of the project and escalate issues for resolution. Each agency will have its own spaces and there are shared facilities. Most importantly, co-locating the agencies allows for close cooperation and new ways of working. I'd point out that the services and the operations of the border agencies are obligations under various legislative and regulatory regimes, and they are essential to an international airport and allow for the legal, safe and secure movements of goods and people. The advantages of a greenfield environment provides tremendous opportunity. Throughout the extensive engagement over years of planning and design for airport operations, the border agencies have been looking for improvements in the way that they work and operate day to day and building this into the design. Our current focus is to ensure that the essential operational requirements of the agencies are being met in the design and that services to the airport are not being compromised, with a focus on the funding envelope that has been provided to us by government. Construction of these facilities are essential to the Commonwealth meeting its obligations, having already decided to construct a second major airport in the Sydney Basin. I thank the committee for its consideration of the projects to date and for the hearing today, and my colleagues and I are ready to answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr Savage. Can I thank all witnesses for the extensive briefing that you did provide the committee earlier. We'll go to questions. Senator Colby.
Thanks, Chair. Look, just a question in relation to the last point that you made around fit out by individual agencies. Can I ask where the planning for that part of the process is, and how that will impact on the capacity to meet operational requirements?
So, Senator, the agencies are designing the spaces with a view to their operations and their requirements, and their particular fit-outs are being what is part of the design process. It just rolls through. It just is not part of the delivery of the projects as articulated to the committee. Do you want to say to that?
I think I understand that. I'm just thinking about future workload of the committee and where that might be coming and what we might need to see to see the completion of this project.
So I think each agency will need to assess its requirements and the whether or not it's triggering the thresholds for the consideration by the committee.
And you don't have any information or advice to us at this stage where those processes are at?
Senator, from the Australian Border Force's perspective, we're still working through those processes, so not yet in a position to give you any advice on that.
Okay. So, flipping on from that to the D, talking about separate buildings for each of the services of the border agencies, and you're bringing them together for the first time. So, as I understand it, there's not that close proximity in any other location where you operate. So, how do you see that working, and how does that impact on the design of the facilities?
So, Senator, I think there is co-location of agencies in canine facilities around the country. The command centre is, I understand, the first time that the agencies might all be together in one building. And largely this comes about from, once you've built an airport, everything that you're doing from that point on is kind of retrofitting a lot of the time. So the agencies are bound by what space is available at other airports around the country, and whether or not they're in close proximity to another largely will depend on the vacancies, I think, that are available. As a greenfield site from WSI, we are able to design everything from the ground up, because essentially outside of the core aeronautical infrastructure, it's a site that has that is ready to be used.
Senator, just to add to that, we're certainly co-located with our partner agencies in other airports and ports, but not in the way that we would come together in one building as proposed under this submission. So at the moment we make it work, but as Mr Savage has said, it provides us an opportunity to train, share information, share conversations, all those things that happen naturally in one place in a much better way to deliver.
Okay, so straight off the back of that question, and going back to my previous question, in the design of the fit-outs, which will be done by the individual agencies, what work's being done to coordinate and collaborate on that to ensure that all of those things you've just talked about occur?
I think, Senator, the design process is, in general, a group collaboration. There are particular one-on-one conversations with individual agencies around specific requirements, but the general design and how the buildings will function and the way that the operations come together to give us what ends up being the facilities is a group discussion that involves WSA, the contractor, all of the border agencies, as well as my department.
When we talk about fit-out, Senator, we're talking about specialist equipment that is specific to our agencies, for example, as opposed to general working areas or shared spaces. So that might look like a specific communication suite that we require, for example, as opposed to what you might think is a complete fit-out of an area.
So who will provide that general fit-out work? Will that be done as a part of this project, or does that get incorporated into the project fit-outs for each individual agency?
There's a general fit-out provided for within this project, including, say, the internal wall, the spatial requirements of the agencies around internal walls, for example, and some basic desks, fixtures and equipment. And everything beyond that point, Senator, will be undertaken by the agencies.
Senator, if I might give an example, Neil Skill from the AUSP. Essentially, we're going to be given a lab space is a great example. The facility itself is going to be ready for us to go in and install the specialist equipment into that space, but the extractors, air conditioning, all of the facilities for the laboratory will already be in place. So it won't be a traditional fit-out that we would have previously come to this committee for, because that's all captured as part of this process. We're just going to be putting the specialist equipment into that room, and similar in server rooms, we're putting active servers into the racks rather than building the whole room.
Okay. Just in relation to the design choice with the options that you considered as a part of your overall process, and landing on option 1, which is providing for capacity for future development and connection, I suppose, to the existing structure. How does that compare with respect to the base case where you're building a standalone, which would not necessarily facilitate that future expansion?
So what happened, Senator, in the assessment of that option was the capital requirements between having a building that could not be expanded to having the building that could be expanded into the future was very minimal. And so the preference was to allow for a building that in the future might be able to expand to become a single unit rather than 2 separate facilities.
Are you able to give us an indication of what that minimal amount was?
Yeah. We think it was under $10 million, Senator. I'd have to confirm that for you, but it was, as I said, it was compared to the cost that we were looking at, it was reasonably small.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Chair.
Mr Zappia.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, you asked one of the questions in the in-camera session that I was going to ask, but my other question was, with respect to the dogs, what is the capacity of the dog training facility, and will it mean that some of the dog training that is taking place elsewhere is going to be relocated to this new facility?
My understanding is that when we say the training within the canine facility, that's just for the dogs that are placed at WSI to continue their work and development. It's not a training facility or a breeding facility at this point. It's not a training or a breeding facility from puppies, for example, to the point that they are working. Once they arrive at WSI, they will be working dogs.
They are working dogs, okay. And they'll be used only at the WSI facility?
And possibly into the surrounds if there's a need for, and one of those operations that we talked about happening outside the airport precinct.
Will it take any load of any other canine training facility?
We don't think so. I think it's an additional workforce.
Yeah, Mr Zappia. So from the Border Forces perspective, our anticipation is that those working dogs would support the Western Sydney precinct and are not intended to take the pressure off other sites. Having said that, obviously as an operational agency, we will use the resources that we have for the best fit on the day, but the intention is absolutely for those working dogs to be used in that precinct.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Senator Kovacic.
Thank you. One of my questions relates to these purpose-built buildings versus some of the suggestions in the submission that, these facilities could be housed in the yet-to-be-constructed business park in Penrith. Could you give me or give us some insight, please, on what the impacts of that would be, any concerns relating to that, and why, particularly in the realm of the 24/7 airport, proximity is important?
I might pass to my colleagues from the Department of Agriculture to give some good examples of that.
Senator, there are current approved facilities where cargo is directed into Western Sydney, where we attend those facilities and undertake inspections of those goods. For Western Sydney Airport, given its location and the lack of infrastructure that surrounds Western Sydney Airport, it was important that we have capability on site to be able to deal with those potential biosecurity risks associated, be it passengers, but particularly with freight. We wanted a response, a timely response to be able to do, for example, scientific diagnostics, or where cargo presents that requires some form of treatment in response to the presence of a risk that could be fumigation, or it could be needing to be washed in a commercial facility. It's necessary to have that capability on site to be able to deal with that, and therefore we're not delaying supply chain products in the supply chain, be it domestically or internationally, if it's in an export capacity.
Senator, from the ABF's perspective, we don't have a current presence in Penrith. Most of our operations, as you would expect, are pretty close to the coast there. Having said that, given that it's a 24/7 facility, being close, as close as possible to the activity is important both for our officers but also for the canines that we're proposing to use. And any sort of transit time that can be reduced to enable operations is a positive for us.
Thank you. Is there any comment from the AFP on that one?
Yes, thanks, Senator. We have requirements with regards to response times to incidents and the ability to surge additional personnel into the site. So being any further away than what is proposed would be, I think, problematic is probably the politest way to put it for us. I think we're very happy with the proposed location because it does allow us to do what we need to do in an incredibly responsive way.
Thank you. And my other question relates to this, cross-agency coordination that we've spoken of and how important it is in terms of being a benefit of what is being proposed here. Can you give an example of how that is different to what is happening at other airports and how this is perhaps a better or best practice?
Senator Rick Hall from Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. In a border operation, we obviously operate very closely with Australian Border Force colleagues. We see the opportunity at Western Sydney Airport, not only in terms of facilities where we can gain better integration and economy of scale, we're looking at opportunities for more integration of our operating models, not only in terms of how we integrate as border agencies, but how we interact with commercial industry operators in the precinct as well. And that goes to technology, but also in terms of how we work together. Joint targeted operations will be much more able to be delivered in that site than perhaps we do elsewhere.
Thank you. That's all from me, Chair.
Mr. Roberts.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'm just mindful of so much construction around the country going on in airports. So my question is, how will construction on these projects be coordinated with other construction in the airport?
Thank you. So the contractor that has been selected by WSA through the competitive process that is undertaking the early contractor involvement, that organisation has been engaged in other works on the airport site as a major works contractor, and those main works are expected to conclude in the early parts of 2025. The airport itself at the moment is more than 90% complete, so what we are expecting is that there will be essentially rolling of staff from one project on the airport to another.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to say a very big thank you for a very detailed presentation. I have been listening to the Senator's questions, and there was some talk about the co-location and all the opportunities that provided. So my last question is, why was only one option considered for the canine facility? I'm mindful that the co-location was discussed, but I was just wondering if there's anything else that could be added to that, please.
I think essentially the requirement for the canine facility is around primarily the number of dogs that would be required and the administration and support mechanisms to support that workforce. In terms of fitting, they are, remarkable animals and very special dogs that also have particular requirements in terms of the space of the kennels, the day runs, and some of the veterinary services and injury rehabilitation services. So a lot of that is kind of pre-designed. So it comes down more to making that fit into the size of land that's available rather than actually thinking about scale. So the scale is driven by the size of the workforce. Right, okay. Well, I've got 2 German Shepherds at my feet as we speak, so I fully understand that they want to be near you and the care of the canine, our canine forces. So thank you so much for what you do. And on that note, Chair, that's enough from me. Thank you.
Very good, thanks. Just a couple from me, just around scheduling and project timelines. If I understand this correctly, the airport will be operational in some capacity before these facilities are complete and in use. How do agencies intend to manage that?
So to be clear, the canine facility is expected to be ready for occupancy in advance of the airport operations. So it's been expressed to us from the agencies that they will have a need to locate the first detector dogs into a facility as soon as they are ready. So that will be delivered ahead of airport operations. In terms of the command centre that will be available for the final fit-outs and commissioning early in 2027, I think it's important to note that WSI will scale up its operations over time, and when it opens, while the commercial agreements are not yet in place, we'll adjust to that schedule as it is negotiated with the international airlines. But there will be the agencies have expressed that they are confident that there will be arrangements in place to manage what will be a smaller workload of international passengers and freight.
Deputy Chair, if I might just add to that from the Border Forces perspective, while obviously the sooner the command centre is available, the better, we are able to and are expecting to undertake interim arrangements. There is space within the terminal precinct, for example, where we intend to be running our command centre operations from until that space is available. So we're confident we will be able to deliver the services required for the operations that the precinct will generate.
And Deputy Chair from the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, we've identified day one interim requirements such as a smaller scientific lab capability, which will be on site. We're still working through the logistics and planning of that at the moment, but we're confident we'll have that in place to be able to respond to the demand from day one.
Deputy Chair, from the AUSP's perspective, we have a slightly different requirement for personnel on the ground at the start of the airport operations. We have to designate the site and make sure that we maintain the security of the site. That being said, we are confident that there's going to be appropriate facilities within the terminal or interim facilities that WSA and the department are working with us to make sure is going to be ready to enable us to provide those services ahead of the airport commencing operations.
And just finally, Deputy Chair, I think just as we factor in contingency into the funding and the expected costs of projects, there's contingency built into the time allowed as well in the schedule. And so we will, the expectation on WSA as the delivery partner will be to try and deliver these facilities as quickly as possible. And with some good luck, the contingency becomes unnecessary.
I prefer to avoid the good luck. We'll go with good planning.
We have both.
Any other committee members? Very good. Further questions from other committee members? Do we have anything else? All right, we'll take that as exhausted. Can I thank you for your attendance here today? If you sent a copy of the transcript to make any corrections to the transcription. If you've taken any questions on notice during today's proceedings, you are requested to provide a response by 5 p.m. on Tuesday the 19th of November 2024 to allow the committee to efficiently conclude its inquiry. Can I thank all of the agencies involved in what is an incredibly important piece of infrastructure for our country and one which will go on to be utilised by the Australian people for decades. So it's important that we get this right, and I know it's been quite an extensive inquiry this afternoon. So thank you to all of the witnesses. Thanks to the Secretariat and committee members. And with that, I declare this public hearing closed.